just tied to the truth and the facts. So let me go ahead and bring Jim on in. Jim, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing a little bit frosty, and I've been enjoying some decompression. And we were talking about how the college football games are a really good source of decompression. Um, what I do is I watch a game, I take a nap, I do some reading, I watch another game, I take a nap, I have a good dinner, and I call it a day. I've got I've got some news to share, and I'm always torn, as I was describing earlier. If it's really important news, then I will share it in a public manner. And I invite people to sign up for the newsletter for more details. And I invite people who are already clients, actively paying subscribers, go check out the report, because I've got that discussed and some of the other ramifications. What does it all mean? And a lot of other topics like XRP. I'm becoming an XRP fan, and honestly, Scott, I'm becoming an XRP student, and I can't say I'm an A student yet. In school, I always strive to be an A student, and it's hard. I'm spread thin, so I've got a couple of colleagues who are more adept at topics like crypto and Bitcoin and XRP and Ethereum, and they teach me. But that doesn't make me an expert. It makes me a diligent student. But I've got some information regarding the H1N. Is that correct?
H1B.
H1B? Okay.
H1B
Sorry.
is in Bravo.
Oh, yeah, right. One bad, one bad. That's my mechanism for remembering. H1B. And let me give a quick preface. I've got a military source. I've got about 3 of them now. And one of them is for long conversations, a fellow in Florida, near CENTCOM in Tampa. But I've got a new one since around September. And it's more like a long intel drop. It could be like a couple pages of intel. And it could be really deep stuff. And it could be counterintuitive at times. And I got to share something that I've learned. And it's really pretty heavy. We were talking about this earlier. It has to do with India and H-1B visas. And on the surface, and I don't buy anything 100%, like you don't, kiss Trump's ring in a genuflected state. I don't either. But here's what I heard. Whew, okay. I explained it pretty well with you. I'm going to try to explain it equally well on the second round here. India is a unique nation. They're probably surpassing China in population at 1.3 billion. They have the largest, how do you want it, prosperous, not wealthy, but prosperous middle class. They have more people in the middle class of India than the United States has population. They have a British roots educational system. If you look at my library for, probability, statistics, mathematics, and computer science, you'll find a few books with Indian name authors. A guy named Rao is one, R-A-W. He was a superstar like 50 years ago in India. India is a nuclear power. They offset Pakistan. They have a standoff. India is a BRICS nation, and they're a unique BRICS nation because they're basically, let's just say, beholden to the British more than they admit. They recently, for instance, said we're not going to be in favor of a gold-backed BRICS currency. We're going to be going it alone and using various options. So India is actually an example for the BRICS nations of, what's the word, adopting and approving and planning to use through implementation a multipolar system, multilateral payment menu. India is very interesting. When I was at Digital Equipment Corp, I knew about 3 or 4 Indian electronic engineer superstars. Out of maybe 20, 30, 40 at Digital, 3 or more were Indian superstars. Okay, here's what I learned from my intel. That's my preface. India is special. Trump has a plan to drain India of its best intellectual talent. And that's a really interesting plan. And he doesn't want to flaunt it in front of the Indian government. But if you notice, the Indian government is often seen in the company of the Russian and Chinese government leadership. So India is special. India has a lot of intellectual talent. And what Trump wants to do is to drain it. And that's why he came out with a statement a few days ago when it's like Elon Musk is the bad cop and Trump is the good cop. Bad cop, good cop. I love that in real life and in movies. It's a very powerful phenomenon and leverage tool. So Elon is saying a lot of wacky shit, honestly, wacky, beyond wacky, like, profanity regarding Americans who object to Elon's hiring for his own company. And I think Elon is going to be making distance from his own companies. SpaceX is going to be his primary company. Tesla, who knows? I don't give a crap about electric cars. I care about hydrogen-powered cars from fuel cells. And the hydrogen, honestly, the Japanese are going to lead the way here. They've got an ammonia turbocharging system that's going to deliver hydrogen. I've always been curious, how are they going to deliver the hydrogen? Can't have a hydrogen tank. Well, you can have ammonia, which is NH3, 1 nitrogen, 3 hydrogens. Okay, back to the issue. Trump wants to hire the best and brightest from India to join the AI, robotics, and I call it higher technology, not high technology, not high tech. Gosh, the Japanese made a word 30 years ago. They call it Zi-Tech, Z-A-I tech. Zi-Tech, that's their high tech description, their label, their word, their name. Trump said, we're going to be making many, many jobs in the United States. We're going to be a mecca for hiring in high tech, and what I say, higher tech, and robotics, AI, data centers, lots and lots of intellectual property is going to come to bear. There's going to be new IP, intellectual property. And Trump wants to make sure that India does not become a next generation technology power. So what Trump has to do is make sure that the idle, the unemployed American or underemployed American intellectuals, like degree holders, a master's in EE, electronic engineering, bachelor's in, chemical engineering, masters and bachelors, eager to work and are underemployed because of all the different betrayals of U.S. corporations, genuflecting and kissing the Rockefeller ring. And I got to give you a little background here. In the 1980s, we had the beginning of outsourcing of American industry while the U.S. was going to go into clean financial engineering. How'd that turn out? Hey, Lehman crisis, how'd that turn out? Turned out to be a gigantic fraud room. I said in the mid 80s, when a group of 4 of us, it was me, Jack, John, and Bob, in my office, not that I was the center of attention, but I had a nice window. in 1984, I said, just fast forward 4-6 years and we're going to have a financial crisis because industry provides and produces legitimate income. And we need legitimate income to manage our debt. Well, in 1987, we had Black Monday. And that's not attributed to outsourcing because the Rockefellers write the history books and the chapters. We're going to have to bring back industry, the subsidiaries, like the big three, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler. There's already now negotiations to bring back industry for the big three auto and truck makers to the United States. Okay, they're going to have to retool the industrial plants to make sure that they're ultra modern and have the best AI. They've already had some AI automation, putting on the fender, putting on certain parts of the car. They're not done by manual means anymore. Trump must create a gargantuan amount of new jobs. There must be a reindustrialization. There must be a calling of U.S. subsidiaries back home. And so far, the main impetus has been foreign corporations saying, we want to make a presence in the United States. But I want the U.S. corporations to say, we're going to bring back our subsidiaries to the United States. We're going to be hiring. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a problem. I don't think there's adequate U.S. labor force. There's plenty of really good labor that's idle. There's plenty of really good U.S. labor, high skilled, that is underemployed. And we need jobs for them, but there are going to be a lot more jobs than just that. And that is what Trump is promising. And he needs to come through, because if he does this well and effectively without interference, which is likely to occur, there's going to be plenty of exodus of the best and brightest from India. And they're going to end up in the United States. And they're going to assist U.S. corporations. They're going to work for them. They're going to develop new intellectual property. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be impressive. And it's not going to be right away. I'm thinking it's going to be 2026 that we have the big rebirth, not 2025. This is the year of bickering, obstructions, clearing the pathway of all the traitors. And there are a lot of traitors, not just in the Congress. There are traitors in the military. There are traitors in U.S. corporations. They're mostly in the high-tech corporations. So that's the explanation I got from my newer written military source. And I tell you, every week, every 2 weeks, there's something that's really quite impressive. I don't want to use fantastic because the root of fantastic is fantasy. It's impressive. It's significant. And there have been 6 or 8 of them so far that I've benefited from. And I'm very grateful to that client follower for supplying them for my benefit. So, Scott, this is not simple. The H-1B, it looks like a betrayal. And Trump, I don't believe, has been a credible spokesman and promoter for his plan. What he has to do is cite the examples, cite the successes. And so far, the main success has been SoftBank for a $200 billion capital investment. But it's going to be exclusively AI and the supporting industries, which are semiconductors and data centers. By data center, it may not be fully understood by people listening. A data center is basically a website farm where there might be 200 to 500 big servers under the roof, and it used to be heavily air conditioned, but I'm told now that they're not as fully air conditioned as they used to be. They're always air conditioned because they generate heat, but it's the data centers that answer your AI query. It's the data center that answers your question, who's the Secretary of State in the Biden show? Oh boy. So the supporting industries for AI are going to be an emphasis for SoftBank. And his name is Maya Son. And I find that to be quite interesting because the Japanese use Son, S-O-N. Like if I were to go to Tokyo, they would say, Mr. Willie Son. Willie Son. They put S-O-N at the end for respect. Well, this guy's last name, his surname is Son. Masayama Son. He's the founder and the CEO of SoftBank. It's one of the biggest capital venture firms on the planet. Okay, that's great. But you know, there's a rub. The rub is that if they have really big success in the next 2 or 3 years, there's going to be a lot of robotic solutions out there and a lot of layoffs. Now, the argument is often heard that for every one job that robotics replaces, it creates 3. Well, that's true. It's true. I really believe it. But it's not for the average Joe and Jill. It's difficult jobs that have a lot of requirements on the resume, a lot of skills required. And, you know, someone who's a high school graduate and hardworking and well-intentioned might not qualify. Okay. This is going to be a really dicey next couple of years.
You threw out a term that cyborg armies, and I thought that was really interesting. Do you want to see about diving off into that? Because what you were talking about was server farms, and this is getting into the whole cyber realm of a lot of things. So how would this play into cyborg armies that you were talking about?
Well, I mentioned robotics.
Mm-hmm.
And robotics includes robots, but it also includes artificial.
Manufacturing.
Pardon me.
Part of like manufacturing, where you're talking about the manufacturing and all these.
Automated manufacturing, putting on
Yes.
fenders and wheel assemblies in cars. Yeah, but artificial intelligence has a lot of other sides. I remember one area of computer science that I found fascinating, but I didn't have skills. I didn't have the skills. It's called rule-based systems. And I'm not talking about Davos. I'm talking about rule-based systems like managing an inventory process. Something really simple. I'll just give you a personal example. When I when I turned 68, I was allowed to take the preferential line at the bank. I call it the old man line. Yeah, give me an old man ticket, thanks. Yeah, I said for a deposit, give me an old man ticket, thanks. And that meant that I went to the head of the line. So there'd be 20 people in line, but for the preferential, the old man line, there were only 2. Okay, now here's an interesting little algorithm for the rule-based system. What happens if the one dedicated window for preferential, you know, it's for people who are very old, people who are in a wheelchair, people who have a cane, women who are pregnant, you know, and add in that the old folks like me. I was 68 and I got to get into the old man line. Now, what happens when the old man window has the worker, and often it's a woman at that window? It's always been a woman at my bank. What happens if she's off for lunch? So how do you change the algorithm so that the old folks and the pregnant and then the cripples, how do they get treated at the bank when their window is not open? All right, so then you mix it in with all the other, okay, rule-based systems. How do we handle hiring with affirmative action? Rule-based system. And they don't want to go overboard with hiring the minorities. Very complicated questions. Rule-based systems. Oh gosh, if I had more time, I could come up with some better examples, but AI includes a lot of different fields. It's robotics, it's super chips, it's rule-based systems, it's automated manufacturing, it's queries. Like I need to do a research report on immune system and what do they call it? It's AED. I can't remember what it stands for. Deficiency. It's how the immune system gets undermined by certain different factors. Okay, I want to do a research paper on such and such. Well, that's part of AI, and it goes out and it searches all different sources and it comes up with a report. And I'm telling you, I've seen a couple reports. I had one that was for an actual project that I'm working on. And the marketing plan that it produced had 5 parts. And I thought, wow, that is impressive. That includes 2 or 3 things I hadn't even thought about. Okay. We're getting off track, but the point is there are going to be a lot of jobs. And AI, with its 5 different sections, is going to be a big piece of this because that's where the battleground is right now. And cyborgs are just one of the side industries of robotics. It's a robot. It's a, okay, I'll tell you a quick story. There's a guy who was in Silicon Valley, and I don't want to mention the company or name, and he vacated when Trump came out with his crimes against humanity law to be applied internationally for sacking the entire wealth of criminals regarding, you know, child crimes and narcotics crimes and all kinds of different nasty crimes. Okay, this guy vacated and he went to China, and he boasted, and I believe this happened around 2021, maybe a little bit earlier. I'm not exactly sure, but he boasted. He said, we're going to have cyborg soldiers in a matter of a couple of years, and they're going to be able to do 360 flips, somersaults in place, meaning you jump, you flip, and you land on your feet, and you do a complete 360. He said, we're going to have in the next year and a half or 2 cyborg soldiers that can leap off a 2nd floor balcony and land on 2 feet with perfect balance. And we're going to have soldiers that can identify the enemy, be programmable, and be very potent on the battlefield or in the underground war. Okay, I'm not an expert in AI, but my friend is on this, and he talks with me, and we have lunch together, and he's a really sharp fellow. And I benefit a lot from his knowledge and his reading. He's worked on the virus. He's worked on immune system. He's worked on AIDS. He's worked on the Ukraine war. He's worked on missile technology. And now he's been actively working on AI queries. And I got to say this, and this is very encouraging. Very encouraging. We have identified the AI engines, and you know, it's Explorer and it's Chat GPT. I call it GoPut so I can remember it. Chat GoPut, and there are others, and every one we've tested has had geopolitical bias. Every single one, on every single major issue, like the vaccine, like coronavirus, like the lockdown, like the Ukraine war casualty list, like territorial gains in the Ukraine war, like Middle East activity, like Gaza like Anthony Fauci. Every single example has revealed their bias geopolitically. So keep that in mind. And if you use it, make sure that your credibility level is strong only in the run-of-the-mill topics like, give me a list of all the Major League Basketball, baseball, and football franchises that had movement and new franchises, expansion and movement. Here's a funny trivial question. Why is Los Angeles Lakers basketball, why are they called Lakers? There are no lakes around Los Angeles. Why are they the Lakers? It's not because LA and LA Laker, LAKER. No, that's not it. That's not it. It's because they were used to be the Minneapolis Lakers and the franchise did not succeed. They had a movement. What do you call it? A franchise. I don't know. There's a word for it. Transition, not transformation, but relocation. And I was big on the relocations. I watched several of them. You had the Montreal Expos. I think they moved to Washington and became the Nationals. Okay, there's a lot. Okay, so that's not a big geopolitical issue. So it did a good job. It answered the questions. And for my marketing question, did a great job. Okay, so beware. Don't ask it the dumbass question, is the mRNA vaccine safe and effective? That's where it fails. And if you ask them about class action lawsuits against Pfizer, it'll give you a mealy-mouthed, dumbass answer. Okay, let's move on. There's a whole lot more going on. Scott, where do you want to take this?
Well, we could go into, all the banks are now starting to, it's even starting to be talked about gold, how it's fixing to make a big move here in 25. And if anybody needs help with silver or gold, they can reach out to me or Jim because we both are dabbling in it. And so, but I thought it was really profound because they never ever talk about gold on, especially like talk radio around here or anything. And now you're starting to hear a lot of chatter about it. So what have you been hearing?
Well, one item that came up was UBS. That stands for Union Bank of Switzerland. They're a Swiss giant. They're two Swiss giants, Credit Suisse and UBS. And they're each corrupt in their own way. I make no bones about it. I think Credit Suisse is the narco money laundering bank for putting, like, NATO generals put their $1 million accounts there from money laundering of narcotics operations coming out of Afghanistan and Ukraine. And UBS, I had a run-in with a client 2 years ago with UBS. They called SLV the Honest Exchange Traded Fund. They called SLV the Honest Exchange Traded Fund. They called Sprott's PSLV a corrupted fund that does not follow the silver price. They got it exactly backward because they're corrupt. SLV, for listeners, don't invest in it. It's run by UBS and a couple of other big banks, and they use your investment to short the silver market. And they boast that it follows the silver price. Well, it does after they suppress it. It follows the silver price. So what? They conduct their corruption and theft, and then they say that it follows the silver price after they smothered it. Right, big deal. Sprott does not smother the silver price. Sprott, PSLV, stands for physical silver. PSLV, Peter, Stephen, Linda, Victor. So what's the news item coming out of UBS? They're saying invest in silver. We see a big upside. I think they said something like $38, $37 for a target in this current year, 2025. So I'm suspicious. I think they're doing hedging against their shorts. And they want to minimize the grand losses from their shorts with some gains on the long side. I don't trust UBS. I made a forecast also about Credit Suisse. This was early last year. No, it was early in 2023. I have to be careful about what I call last year now. In early 2023, I said that the Russians were smashing money laundering centers, and it's going to result in the failure of Credit Suisse because they're not going to get their money laundering income. And I thought it was going to be 4 or 5 months, but it turned out to be 2, and I got it right. They entered a failure, and there were a lot of moving parts for that. And UAE pulled their investment on a Credit Suisse corporate bond, and that was the fatal attempt. And then the Swiss government refused to do funding for a merger between UBS and Credit Suisse, and that's not been in the news for the last several months, which tells me that they're using narcotics money laundering funds in order to patch things up and to get everything coochie coo. I tell you, there's a lot going on, and I call out analysts, financial analysts. Why don't you ever talk about money laundering? Why don't you call out Bank of America for money laundering? Their nickname is the Bush Narco Bank. Why don't you call out Credit Suisse as a money laundering bank from Ukraine? Why are you ignoring an $800 billion to $1.2 trillion banking factor? And what I've heard from a couple is, well, there's nothing really definitive about the data. Right. There's nothing really definitive about your backbone. Okay, so I made my point. UBS, I believe, is engaged in some hedging on their own wrong underwater position, and they're trying to minimize. It's interesting that silver has not really broken above the 35 mark, which I expected, and so did Michael Oliver expect that by the end of the year. Michael Oliver thought it would happen in November. I thought it would happen by the end of the year. That guy has a better track record for commodity pricing than I do. I'm all over the place, focusing on the BRICS and the banking sector and gold and silver, and oh boy, I tell you, I feel like I'm spread thin, doing the best I can, and I'm very grateful to my very smart colleagues. There are 3 or 4 of them who help me out a lot. It's interesting that we're being told some wacky stuff like Bitcoin is the new gold. No, there is no new gold. Gold is gold, and there's no replacement of gold. There's no new silver for technology. Silver is the ultimate in technology metal. There are plenty of applications that could use platinum, but the scientists have been working for like half a century in trying to come up with a replacement for silver for advanced technology usage, and they haven't failed. I believe XRP is going to be the second chance. I'm rambling here, Scott, forgive me, but I think XRP is going to be a second chance for those who missed out on Bitcoin and followed it, and who thought that, my gosh, Bitcoin's gone from 100 to 1,000. What kind of upside does it have from here in year 2012? Well, it had another 100-fold to go. XRP, I think, is going to be a magnificent winner for those who missed on Bitcoin. So load up. The number of their partners is growing magnificently. The number of their banking partners is now like over 30 major banks. And Japan and Russia are going to be very big adopters for XRP as intermediary payment systems. And let me just give a quick fact here. XRP is about 1% the cost of SWIFT. Now, if you're moving several $1,000s and they charge you $30, well, XRP would have done it for 30 cents, 100 to 1 advantage. And SWIFT is now much quicker. I've noticed that since February of last year, SWIFT has been much, much quicker. Like the bank would say, well, Mr. James, your transfer will probably arrive at your account in a minimum of 2 days. No, a minimum of 2 hours. So the bankers don't even know their own industry now with QFS, Quantum Financial System, kicking in gear. And I believe some of them are using crypto for payment systems, and they're still charging $30 when they should charge maybe $1. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of ripe competition. Okay, what I'm leading to is the cost-effective advantage of XRP versus Swift, and why I believe they're going to capture a nice big slice of the Swift business. If they're 1% of the cost, and it's like seconds, let's just call it 20 seconds to finish and complete an XRP payment, as opposed to say 4 hours. Well, 4 hours, how many seconds is that? 60 per minute, 3,600 per hour, maybe 10,000 seconds, and XRP did it in 30. Okay, so again, you're talking about a 300 to 1 advantage. So if it's 300 to 1 in timing and 100 to 1, are you not talking about a 30,000-fold cost-effective advantage of XRP? This is one reason among many that it's going to go not to the moon, but it's going to do so much better than most people, including smart analysts, expect. Okay, I made a call 3 or 4 months ago that XRP was going to be at least $2 by year end. And I give credit to my colleague who told me that, and the other colleague who reinforced that with information. And it got to 250, and it bounced around between 210 and 240 for the last couple of weeks, the last 10 days of the month. And now at New Year, it's back up. I think it's going to make a move toward this year. I think it's going to make a move toward 10, 20, or 30. And it's going to shock the shit out of a lot of people. It's got a lot of adopters, a lot of partners, and it's scalable, it's a lot cheaper, and it's a lot faster. It's 30,000 to 1 cost-effective advantage. And that's not talking shit. That's talking reality. Do some homework. I've been doing a little bit every single day in researching XRP. And I'm very happy that I've got a few clients who say, Jim, you might find this interesting. They're helping the research process because they know I'm interested in it. They know I've got some good, smart people behind me regarding XRP. And I just wish I had 20 times the size of an account, but I don't. I tell you, Scott, there's a general theme that I'd like to get involved in, and it's obstruction and revolutionary progress, revolutionary in a positive sense. But any revolution in a positive sense is harmful to the cabal that have a stranglehold. So they're two sides of the same phenomenon. The next 6 to 8 months, we're going to see a lot of obstacles, a lot of interference. And I have a way of describing this. I'm unique in my way. The way I am. It's going to be, well, we've got a bill here before Congress, or we've got a policy that Trump is addressing and promoting and developing. Will all the traitors please rise?
Yeah.
In the Congress, all opponents to this fair trade policy and the bill, all opponents, please rise. All those people who want Trump to be disqualified for a misapplication of the 14th Amendment, please rise. I tell you, this is going to be interesting. Where do you want to go with this, Scott? It's your show.
This kind of gets to a question that I want to kind of throw out there because I talk about it. A lot of these alphabet agencies are corrupt. There is no fixing them. They just need to go away. And to think, that the IRS is a legitimate agency, that's corrupt. We all know it. FBI, CIA, all these different alphabet agencies need to be, you can't revamp them. They need to be removed. So if you had access to Trump's ear, I know I got a guy that he's big into, you know, taxes and IRS. He tries sending a letter to Trump, nothing ever gets through. And he's like, man, I guess I should be on the internet or something, because he's calling it out. It's all corrupt. We all know it's corrupt. If you had Trump's ear and you could definitely be an advisor to him, what are a couple of things that you would say? Because I know what I would say, and I wouldn't be bashful about it. And I certainly ain't going to kiss his ass when I said it either. I'd be telling, the IRS is corrupt. All these other things are corrupt. What is it that you would want to tell Trump in order to navigate through this next term to, Doge is talking about, oh, we need to eliminate all this. Look at Millie and what he's been doing down there in Argentina, just removing government agencies to the tune of 90%, and his whole economy is taken off gangbusters. If you want to give America a shot in the arm, get rid of the IRS. That's my opinion. What is it that you would want to say to Trump? Because I say it every day.
That's one of the toughest questions, and I don't think I'd ever be in a position for that opportunity. But it's something
Hypothetically.
I've not given it a lot of thought, Scott, because I've been like a very bold, outspoken opponent of public policy, and right now my suspicions are rising for Trump. I would tell him to begin with, don't betray the patriots.
Yep.
Um, get to an honest monetary system, and you've got to get asset backing, uh, primarily gold, but you want to bring in oil to some extent, fine.
Sure.
Um, I would say be honest in your foreign policy with the people, and be honest in your monetary policy with the gold standard,
Mm.
and do your dead level best to honor your debt, the debt. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could bring 300,000 tons of gold to honor our debt and start anew? I'm telling you, this is going to be a very dangerous situation with the U.S. government debt. And I'm just going to mention a couple of things here on my notes. Pardon me. I don't think
I wanted to ask you a really tough question, and this is going to be something that's, it's going to, when we talk about it, it gets put out into the ether and it slowly makes its way around. I always tell everybody we're 3 years ahead of the curve. That's why I bring you on. You're able to forecast out into the future and see things that other people don't. But when we talk about this, trust me, it will get out there and get around. So, you definitely have an honest voice that needs to be heard.
we need honest money. We need to eliminate the debt. We need to get away from this lunatic notion of outsourcing our industry, and the lunatic worse notion that financial engineering has been successful and will be viable. Okay, remember in 2002 and 3, Alan Greenspan had to walk backwards on his claims from the previous several years that financial engineering was effective offloading of risk. And Lehman Brothers crisis, which is badly named, it was more like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs crime scene,
Hmm.
and blaming Lehman and victimizing Hank Greenberg's AIG in order to sack it. And they threatened to kill him. We need honest money. We need to redeem the debt. And let me address something that I believe is a wonderful concept that needs to blossom, but also needs to have, how shall I say it? a magnificent development of the concept.
Give
It's
it legs.
debt to equity. What was that?
Give it legs.
Give it legs, implement, develop, and get ideas. It's called debt to equity. Okay, I'll give you an example. The Japanese and maybe Toyota would be a good example. Toyota is a truck and car vehicle company, and they're involved in all kinds of new things like the fuel cell, hydrogen
Right.
fuel cell, ammonia, turbocharged ammonia fuel. Anyway, Toyota might own, let's just make up something. They might own $20 billion worth of treasury bonds, just Toyota. This is just an example. They might own a lot more than that, but let's just say they own 20 billion in treasury bonds. And they come to Trump and the Department of Treasury and say, we want to implement and convert this debt to equity in the big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. We want to expand the plants and do partnerships with Toyota. We want to have like a Ford Motor and Toyota plant. One half, huge acreage. And over there is Toyota, and over there is Ford. And then the dealerships start sharing, where Ford Motors dealerships start selling Toyotas. The new Toyotas made in the United States. Now, this opens up a lot of new territory, new concepts, and new everything, because Toyota would need to know what are the rules and regulations for converting U.S. government treasury bond debt to equity in an expansion of, say, Ford Motors. So Ford Motors might say, well, let's do a very aggressive $40 billion corporate bond issuance. And some of it will be preferred stock that will accommodate Toyota. And they're going to put in 20 billion, and we're going to get an additional 20 billion in corporate bond issuance. And maybe some of it will be stock, a mixture of stock, bonds, preferred, whatever. What are going to be the rules and regulations? Will there be a limit to what a foreign shareholder can participate for the new company? What about a board member, one or two from Toyota on the Ford Motor board? Okay, what about lending? Will Trump open up the spigot and say, we will supply shares? We will supply cash in order to redeem for shares. Okay, what I've heard is that Trump has said that we want the Department of Treasury to issue coupons, like for Toyota or a foreign U.S. Treasury bond holder. And the coupons would be used to buy stock. The coupons would be used to buy bonds, like the issuance of Ford Motor in the secondary stock issuance or additional bond issuance. This can get very complicated. Will there be limits for what one country can have dedicated for a conversion to coupon? Will the coupons be 100% requirement for U.S. soil, plant, and equipment? Then you've got issues regarding training. Toyota might say, well, we want a new plant, but I don't think you've got adequate labor force to manage it all. So we're going to have a training program. And then you get the conflict of, do you get the sponsors from the foreign company that are now shareholders with interest? Do they have the extra expense of a training program, or do they just hire from India at a discount on salary? Okay, lots and lots of questions. And I invite Trump to open up the forum for a debate on how this is to be managed, rather than to rely on his inner circle, let's just say, that is dominated by people who are, oh gosh, it's hard to describe without getting into a problem. Many inner circle Trump,
anti-American.
not so much anti-American, but people who are on a who put him on a leash, and the origin on the leash and the hand on the leash is that little country in the southeast corner of the Mediterranean. Okay, I am absolutely sick and tired of gigantic foreign aid to a nation that is used to bribe our Congress.
Agreed.
I'm absolutely sick and tired of it. And let them be revealed. And I don't want to get into Epstein. I don't want to get into Diddy, and
I
it's
know.
very ugly and hairy stuff.
But to get back to your point where you're kind of getting off into the weeds, this is where technology can actually start to benefit with this, like a cyborg type army in the manufacturing aspect. I'm totally for technology. I mean, if we didn't have technology, you and I wouldn't be talking right now, you know? So I'm for technology. Technology should be able to benefit mankind, to make mankind to where we shouldn't have to work so hard. And, you know,
Well,
all this.
technology enabled us to have a 2-day weekend. In a lot of lesser nation economies, they have to work half on Saturday.
Well, and so this gets to
Ah,
my point where technology could pick up in a lot of this slack where a lot of these questions arise. And so this is the benefit of technology. Technology is just like a gun. A gun can be used for good or evil. It just depends on who's holding it. And so with that aspect of it, now we're able to, we got to recognize the problems, and that's the biggest thing. Is nobody wants to address the problems. They want to just dance around it. Oh, we can rebuild this, you know, corrupt ass system. No, you can't rebuild this shit. It is corrupt to the core. It is ran by a bunch of Satanists, and until the problem is solved, you can't move forward. It's like building a house. If you build a house on a shitty foundation, you're going to have a shitty house. That's just all there is to it.
no matter how much renovation you have atop the shitty foundation.
Exactly.
Right.
So it has to be torn down and it has to be rebuilt. And
Rebuilt.
we are the people that are going to rebuild it. It's not a
Do,
bunch of,
do you,
go ahead.
Scott, do you remember about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the end of the Trump administration, and there was a concept that was floated about, and Trump joined in this conversation, and he basically endorsed it. The question was, if we've got this Standard and Poor 500 and NASDAQ stock index, and both stock indexes, and they're really kind of up at nosebleed level, where do we go from here if we rebuild the U.S. economy and have a new technologically advanced economy? President Trump, before he finished his first term, and he came up with an idea that I thought was really quite interesting and possibly feasible. We will have a conversion of the equity to new plant and equipment. We don't want to destroy the equity in the stock market. We want the valuation to be high, maybe even higher than it deserves, because of the future prospect of rebuilding at the base level, like ground level, greenfield. I don't pretend to have a complete knowledge of the terminology, but my understanding of greenfield is you buy a green pasture and you got no plant and equipment, and you start from scratch and you build a plant, you put the equipment in, you bring in the labor force, and you make something new, and you do it from the ground up. It's not taking like an old plant and retooling a bit and putting out new technology. No. Greenfield means start from scratch. Okay, we need to start from scratch with the U.S. Congress. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you're aware, but did you notice what Trump has said recently about the 55 stars on Air Force One?
No.
He's saying, beware, the 5 stars, and this is, according to what is being told, according to what is being bandied about, we're talking about Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and Mexico. 5 stars. Unbelievable. And to me, it's a bad idea. To me, it's to remove. Okay, when he talks about 100% tariff, it'd be a tariff imposed on all those countries that are not part of the expanded United States. We're talking about more than the United States of North America, UNNA, no, USNA. I thought that originally that was the United States Naval Academy. No, it's the United States of North America. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Okay, he is talking about a future expansion of the United States. And I don't know whether it's just going to be for trade or for government, but oh, did I say Canada? I meant Canada in there also.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, there's talk about Canada, and I'm going off on another tangent here. There's talk about Canada becoming the 51st state, and Queen Trudy, being the governor of Canada. And you know, I've got a very surreptitious, clandestine, intriguing interpretation of this. Isn't it interesting that all the strong supporters of Trudeau suddenly fell off the stage, resigned, maybe resigned under hidden threat, and suddenly this supposedly new governor of Canada doesn't have any legs. So, did Trump start something by talking about Canada as the 51st state? Did he start something that destroyed Trudeau while shaking his hand and smiling at his face? I think yes. Let me add something about Canada. Many Americans know that Canada's a large country. They may not know that it's full of minerals, full of tar sands, full of oil, and it goes up to the Arctic Circle. I don't mind telling this story. It was 1987, and I was, let's just say I was in a hospital, rehab. I was in a hospital, and I met this really interesting guy from north of Toronto. His name was Kevin. He was a bit of a stud. He always had a couple of ladies on his arm, left arm, right arm. Nice guy. I buddied up to him because he was a lot of fun. And he said, when I asked him, what do you work? He said, I work in setting up cell towers and connections in northern Ontario. And I say, well, how far north do you mean in northern Ontario? And he said, way the F up. And I said, you mean like 300 miles north of Toronto? And he said, yeah, and more north. We do most of our work in the summertime when the days are long. But yeah, way the hell up. And he said, Jim, many Americans don't have a real concept of how big Ontario is. It goes all the way up toward the Arctic Circle. And he said, in the summertime, their animals and elk, they're running all over the place. And they migrate south for the winter time. And they said, Toronto is way south in Ontario. Well, I've got a client, and I don't want to mention details on the issue, but he said, Jim, are you aware that the Northwest Territory has a lot of gold, has a lot of platinum, has a lot of copper, has a lot of metals and minerals, the Northwest Territories? And I had to check a map. Well, they got a Yukon Territory, they got a Northwest Territories, and this is part of Canada. Okay, they don't have full representation in the parliament, not like Ontario and Quebec and British Columbia. Okay, Trump might have a plan to annex Canada in order to bargain away some of the gigantic, gargantuan U.S. government debt to equity. What could some of the equity be? Mining in the Northwest Territories. We couldn't do that unless Canada is part of the United States or some kind of a merged union entity. I say there are a lot of really big things coming down the pike, really big things. And it's exciting, but I don't want betrayal of the patriots.
Right.
I have a client who said, Jim, This is weird, but hear me out. I have a friend who has a different friend, and that different friend, so it's three degrees of separation from me, my client, other and another, no, four to get to the Trump prayer group. And he said, don't judge Trump harshly regarding Middle East policy, especially regarding the little nation that you like to call in the southwest corner of the Mediterranean. I don't like mentioning even the name. He said Trump is going to be advocating a two-nation solution in that region, which means like Judea or Palestine, or I don't know. I don't care about the name. I do care about genocide. And Trump has never spoken out against genocide. I consider that to be a major fault from Donald J. Trump.
I agree. And I think, Trump has, for whatever reason, Trump thinks he controls planet Earth. And I think when he floated out his little concept to Russia, hey, we're going to end the Ukraine war on these terms, and Russia said, not so fast there, big boy. We're not buying into that. And so Trump floats out a lot of ideas, like, oh, I think we'll just buy Greenland or annex Canada or, do this or do that,
Take
and
back the Panama Canal.
oh yeah, let's not forget about the Panama Canal. And so, like I say, Trump doesn't control planet Earth. And so I think it's important that these countries stay independent and that they have their own BRICS nations so that they can force Trump to have to deal with them on their terms instead of just his terms alone. And this is like the whole patriot movement. When we come out and call out things like IRS and everything like this and corrupt government, it's because they are corrupt. And this is a system that is corrupt. There is no hiding it. It is well known by anybody that has two functioning brain cells that can rub together. And so Trump has to deal with these people as individuals and respect them for that. And this is why I wanted to float out the ideas like, if you had a megaphone in his ear, what are you going to tell him versus what I'm going to tell him from my side of the patriot movement? This is things that he needs to respect and pay attention to. And I think he will if he gets proper information, because, like we were talking about earlier, he's getting the same information from the same mealy mouth people that he has surrounding him, and he's surrounding himself by a bunch of millionaires and billionaires. They're not common people like we are. And so we're the ones that are standing up, jumping up and down with our hair on fire, saying, hey, you better pay attention to us. We're the ones who were backing you for all this time during the 4 years during the corrupt ass election.
Yeah, but we're not the billionaire backers, Scott, and we need to be very aware of that. Right now, he seems to be, this is according to one of my clients, he seemed to be putting forward the old Koch brothers agenda from several years ago. Okay, if I were in his ear, I would say multipolar, Donald, multipolar, Donald. We're not the exception nation anymore. Multipolar, Donald, for government and for money, monetary systems, and for trade payment systems, multipolar solutions,
Agreed.
multilateral solutions.
I
You
agree.
don't give the bankers the main seat at the table. You give them an equal seat at the table. And I believe this is a really big principle that I've been espousing, and that is the next year or two, we need to take the bankers and their powerful position and reduce it to equal seat at the table. And that's going to be a really bitter pill for some of them to swallow. You tell a JP Morgan vice president that he's going to be at a table and at the same table as Reggie Middleton and a number of different small banks in Alabama and Louisiana. He's going to say, what? Okay, not going to be palatable for them. Okay, Trump has actually threatened the BRICS nations,
Yeah.
and and it's one of, I think, the least intelligent maneuvers that he's done in a long time. If he wants the BRICS nations to abandon the alternative payment systems that are non-dollar and asset backed, then what he's asking the BRICS nations to do is to dissolve their union.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that. And what he's saying is he wants the U.S. to maintain a unipolar position with a unilateral payment power, and that's not going to float. The BRICS are all about multilateral solutions, multipolar distribution of power geopolitically. And I'd like to see them make the new United Nations. I heard it's going to be in Laos. That's what I heard. I heard it repeated often, a few times. They got to shut down the United Nations in New York City. Obama was using that as his puppet headquarters for the Biden show during his third term. The multipolar solution is the future,
Yes.
and the exceptional nation has to go out the door. Okay, if they impose, if the United States with the new leaders like Bessent at Treasury, I just got to say, I want a full exposure of the Department of Treasury corruption and the missing billions and possibly missing $1 trillion under Janet Yellen. I'd like that traced back to the Swiss banks. I'd like the identification to take place. Trump must accept the multipolar solutions. Trump must accept that the dollar will be the new dollar, whatever it's going to be, whatever form. It will have its place. It'll have its share. But XRP is going to be a payment system. The unit will be a payment system. It's going to have a gold backing. There's going to be other different systems that will be viable, and they're not going to be comprehended until they come out. I'm telling you, it's going to be an exciting time. And I truly believe XRP is going to take a rather notable, sizable slice of the multi-trillion-dollar SWIFT traffic. Multipolar solutions will include XRP. Some people come out. I got to make this comment because it's so relevant. Some people have made the shallow argument that DARPA created Bitcoin and all the cryptos follow under the dark cloud of DARPA. And I say, well, DARPA created email also. Have you ever taken a large trailer truck with several hundred cats on it and opened it up so the cats are released into the open meadow, and then you try to catch them?
Yeah.
It's called herding cats. Good luck with that. I've done herding of my cat, but a couple times I caught her. Her name was Tiffany. She was wonderful. Western suburbs of Boston. Tiffany, long-haired black cat. I miss her. She was cute. She slept with me. She slept on my hind end, and was remarkably cute, but she was impossible to catch if she didn't want to be caught. She would climb a tree and then meow at me as much as to say, hey, try to catch me, big guy, you silly two-legged human. But when I was working on my roof, Tiffany found a way to get up to the roof and just sit next to me while I'm pounding nails into shingles. She just sat next to me. Anyway, email was an example of how DARPA could no longer herd cats. It became Ethernet at the beginning. When I was working at Digital, I had 1980 to 1992, but in the early years, we had something we called ENET, and there was no public email. There was no widespread email. It started up slow. We called it ENET. It was short for Ethernet. And it was for connecting the U.S. military, the universities, and major digital equipment corp clients. And then they had the technological development of a bridge and then a router. And before you know it, the military was bridged and routed outside, the universities were bridged and routed outside, and the major clients were bridged and routed outside. And then America Online was launched. Then you had Hotmail. Then you had Yahoo Mail. And those are the weak sisters in the crowd. Those are the weakest emails. I've come to learn that SBC Global and Comcast are the shittiest email service providers out there. I've had numerous problems with them and my clients. SBC Global and Comcast. They're shit. Back to the multipolar. Trump should seek multipolar advice for a Middle East solution. Instead, he's very likely to listen to his leash holders, who are gigantic donors to his cause and who helped bail him out for his 3 bankruptcies. Okay, people call him a genius. Well, a genius doesn't find himself in 3 bankruptcies. 3 bankruptcies means that he's beholden to the bankers because they continue to support him. He's going to have a problem with the bankers. And I identify 3 groups that are going to want to cut his life short. I'm going to be careful with my words. The medical pharmaceutical establishment for the cancer cures that are coming, the lawsuits against the vaccine, the improper falsification of data for death, violation of clinical trial procedures with the FDA, corruption of the FDA, false labeling of products. And Robert Kennedy just won a Supreme Court case, and it wasn't Pfizer and the mRNA vaccine. No, it was Pfizer and the mRNA gene editing product with false labeling and no cure. Okay, that's one group, the medical pharmaceutical establishment. Second group is going to be the information establishment. News networks, search engines, spell checkers, social networks, big tech. We call it big tech info. Big tech infotech, information technology. Well, it's going to break down at the news network stage. That's where the first big breaks are going to take place because they're bankrupt. And as I don't know who said it, maybe it was Elon or some other fellow who said, golly, so it seems like the business model founded on lie, distortion, and political bias just didn't work out and become profitable. Exactly. All right, so Langley, which is basically narcotic funded and funneled a lot of narcotics money laundering into gigantic big tech firms, and to make manageable and malleable and controllable CEOs, they're going to want to kill Trump if he goes in there and tries to fire people and cut out all the censorship, which apparently is back in, let's just say, half force at Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Third group, military. I call it the warriors. The warriors are going to want the forever war to continue. This has been going on for decades.
Right.
And my critical, sarcastic comment is, yeah, let's end the Ukraine war. We can always move it to the Middle East. I believe that Trump is going to end the war above ground and not end the war below ground in Ukraine. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to end the war below ground. And it's not going to be easily done because it's connected to the Swiss banks where the Octagon Group controls trillions. In other words, they're going to try to threaten Trump. Okay, so the warriors are going to say to the DOGE group, the government efficiency group, that, by the way, has no constitutional powers, none. They can make alliances with the Congress, with the Speaker of the House and Budget Ways and Means group. They can do that. But it's going to be difficult, and the warriors are going to resist any reduction in the $840 to $880 billion budget annually. And by the way, the Rockefellers on the medical side, I didn't mention, they have control over the $1.3 to $1.4 trillion Medicare Medicaid budget. So some of that is spent on cancer treatment. And by the way, chemotherapy costs the drug companies $70, and they charge $70,000 for its usage. They bill the insurance companies. I'd like to see the insurance company take on head on the medical establishment as corrupt, because the insurance companies are paying out and they don't have bond income because the yields are so darn low. Okay, the warriors are going to threaten Trump. You continue with the forever war. You find a way to continue with other wars. Maybe we can have a good war in Africa. And by gum, maybe it'll have 5 different locations. We can have it in Sudan. We can have it in Niger. We can have it in Congo. Maybe we can have a war in South Africa over the gold mines. Okay.
This gets into the ultimate question, because we obviously know the only way that these big entities are going to go away is if the economy was to crash. And you were talking about the stock market, and you're kind of like, well, we don't really want the stock market to crash, but you had this ultimate theory you've been floating around that it's going to go up and up and up until it pops. So would this equate to that scenario where the stock market was to go up and pop and do it on Trump's watch, where he has to come in here and rebuild it, because he's obviously good at since he's been what did you say? He had several bankruptcies. He knows how to navigate a bankruptcy, obviously.
Yeah. We got the
So
right guy in the office, but Scott, if we do a debt to equity conversion through Department of Treasury coupons, that's brilliant for reconstructing at the grassroots level the United States economy. If we
does
can
that
do a
mean
debt to equity, can we do an equity to equity? Can we do an old school equity to a new school equity? I think yes. And that's what Trump has a big challenge to do. And I think he's getting a lot of brain power devoted toward that issue. What do we do about old smokestack industries? And just simple things like clothing and housewares. I mean, I bought a dish, what do you call it? A dish dry. It's 2 feet by 1.5 feet. And you put the dish in, and you stack them in, you put the silverware, and you put the cups. We don't make them in the United States. I mean, housewares. We need to rebuild the U.S. economy with all the low tech and the new tech and the higher tech. We can't just be devoted with robotics and data centers and super chips. No. We have to be devoted to car tires, to car parts, truck parts, to not necessarily refineries for petroleum-based products. That's going to go by the wayside in the future. We need to be concerned with solar panels and new technology with solar devices, concentrated like in Barstow, California, concentrated, parabolic dishes, concentrated. We've got a lot of very optimistic and hopeful new technology coming down the pike. We haven't talked much in the last several months about new Tesla engineering for energy production. I've had 3 clients who've seen the Tesla clip. And the Tesla clip takes 500 watts and turns it into 50,000. We're going to have neighborhoods and apartment buildings and subdivision developments that are powered by a bank, a stack in series of Tesla clips, and they're going to produce tens of thousands of watts. It's called megawatts. No, kilowatts. Kilowatts is 1,000, megawatts is million, and terawatts.
Gigawatts.
No, wait a minute. Gigawatt. Wait a minute. Megawatts is million. Gigawatts is billions. Terawatts is trillions. Right. Kilo, mega, giga, tera. We're going to have megawatt Tesla banks for production. Imagine an apartment building, 200 units, 25 stories high. Oh my gosh. That is one reason why the elites are going to stop Trump or work to stop Trump. I'm going to say something, and we got to close this, but I'm going to make a general forecast that the next 2 years is going to be full of compromises, full of agreements that are intermediary. Because anyone who thinks that we're going to take this large group of billionaire elites and trillionaires and render them toothless and sack all their wealth and to hang them all, you're out of your mind. You have no concept of reality. We're going to have a 2-year period where their power is weakened in compromise. Their wealth could be confiscated, but not completely taken, maybe frozen. And they work with humanity for some kind of peaceful coexistence with the Satanists. Good luck with that, because it's going to be a major challenge. Satanists don't compromise, they kill, they destroy. When I was growing up, I heard, what's a Satanist? Well, they want hell on earth. There you have it. Simple explanation for an 8-year-old. They want hell on earth. You look at some of the futuristic movies, like even Blade Runner 2, 40, what do they call it? 2049. I call it Blade Runner 2. And even Harrison Ford was in it. But they had Ryan, can't think of his name. Not Ryan Reynolds, Ryan Griswold, I can't think of his name. They had a bleak look at humanity. There were no trees. They farmed protein from worms. They had flying vehicles. Ryan Gosling, he did a good job. He was actually a cyborg police investigator. I like futuristic movies, and I pay close attention to what they're saying and what they're doing. I got to say something again in closing here, Scott. I had one client who was in touch with me a couple of years ago, and this client obtained 2 med beds in the black market. I called black market because when I asked, where'd you get it? Where'd you buy them? What'd you pay for them? The client said, well, that's something I can't really talk about. I said, because it was secondhand black market. Was it military? What can you tell me? Military discarded old obsolete med bed. And when you get 5 seconds of silence after a tough question, it's like an implicit confirmation. So that's what I think it was. And the client said to me, Jim, we're going to fix your right shoulder, your left knee, and maybe even your retina. I've got a left retina problem. It's a weird issue. I had a blood blister on my retina years ago. I had a bang sequence of events of a job layoff and a divorce, and I ended up getting all stressed out, and I had a blood blister on my left retina. Hey! Anyway, the same client said to me, and I'm right now testing the age regression. And I said, tell me more about that. And he said, well, you may know that the military is using it for regenerating organs and battleground wounds for soldiers in the underground war. I said, yeah, I heard about that. And he said, they're also using it on rescued kids. I said, do you have this from people who talk to you and they're firsthand? He said, well, it's people that I know who know people who directly know. So, it's a few degrees of separation of actual. And he said to me, Jim, we're going to have you flown here and we're going to fix you up and we're going to knock off 25 years in your life because I know you have deep regrets for a lot of years that you lost from some drug usage. I said, yeah, but not narcotics. I had no cocaine. And he said, yeah, well, what was it? Marijuana? I said, yeah, marijuana and hashish. Scott, there was one time my buddy and I, we were into all kinds of weird stuff. We bought a block of hashish. We bought 3-ounce block of hashish and it was dark red. It wasn't brown. And it was in a Kabul newspaper wrapping with Urdu language in the articles. We got Afghan hashish. This was 1973.
Wow.
Anyway, I was promised to fix my shoulder, my knee, my retina, and to knock off 25 years. I said, yeah, it sure would be nice to have those years to live over again because I messed up. I messed up in some of my early years. I messed up. But I got rehabbed, and last April was 37 years from my drug rehab. I know it doesn't sound right. I say marijuana only. I should say marijuana, and I said no, like Nancy Reagan. I just said no to the mescaline, the LSD, the barbiturates. I just said no. But I certainly did say yes to good weed. And some people say you shouldn't talk about it. I say, well, run your own newsletter, do your own shows, and manage your own life. It was 37 years ago. And my father was very proud of me for getting rid of a problem and moving forward and staying on the straight and narrow. Not exactly straight and narrow, but straight and slightly curved. The next 2 years, Scott, it's going to be dangerous. There are going to be threats. There are going to be numerous attempts. I've heard from my military source that there were 30 attempts to kill Trump. There have been 3 attempts since the Butler, Pennsylvania.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. But I just want to get back to the one issue where, so are you thinking now that will the stock market go up and up and up until it pops, or are we going to be moving more into converting a debt to equity type scenario in the coming years? What is
Well, the coming years have to involve equity to equity, not just debt to equity, not just U.S. Treasury bond debt to equity, plant and equipment, et cetera, in the U.S. economy. We've got to find a way to avoid a crash that the elites and the Trump enemies might attempt in the next several months to crash the stock market. 20, 30, 40% decline in the stock market. That would be horrible for the nation. I'd like to see that equity converted to new equity. Old equity, new equity, while we get the Treasury bond debt to new equity. I'd like to see that. I don't necessarily think the stock market is going to go up, 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 up forever. No, it had no business going up in the last 4 years. We're in an economic depression.
right?
And what's really kind of ironic right now, Scott, is that the people who gave us the economic depression, the elites, the puppeteers behind the Biden show, they're going to expose the depression that they created in
So
order
that they
to
can blame it
embarrass
on
Trump.
Trump. So they can
And
blame
blame
it
it
on
on Trump.
Trump.
And it's not going to stick. The
Right,
blame
right.
will not stick. It will not stick. In fact, the only way it could possibly stick a little bit is if they wait a year. But they're not going to want to wait a year because patience, although that is a cabal trait, not in this example, because Trump is going to be busily sacking their wealth and executing them at the lower level, working upward.
Right.
We're never going to get to the higher level in executing them. It's not going to happen. I have a rule of thumb that I use. Okay, we hear about Davos and we hear about the Bilderbergers. Therefore, they're not in control. They take orders. And I've only gotten wind of a couple of different names of the multi-trillionaires, and Rothschild is not among them. Rothschild is in the news. Therefore, he's not in control. He takes orders. There are two names that I've heard. I only mention them in private conversation, never in a public interview. They're the multi-trillionaires. And I always wonder, well, what does their portfolio look like? Because I got this question answered by my, he was a source, I called him Cato, and he was talking about the Bush crime family. And I said, what is their portfolio? You say that, and this was 2016, he said they've got 5 trillion in assets under management. And he knew of one of the managers. He said there are like half a dozen, 6 to 10 different managers, depending on what you consider to be a manager. I said, what does their portfolio look like? And he said, well, can you imagine the entire nation of Colombia? And I said, yeah, farms, ports, banks, highways, shopping malls, commercial property. He said, yeah, and the drug centers. He said, they own all Colombia. I said, well, what's Colombia worth? And he said, I don't really know, maybe $1 trillion, I don't really know. I said, well, in their portfolio, what do the trillionaires own? He said, they own entire industries. They might own all the news networks in a country. They might own all the banks in a country. He said, years ago, Papa Bush went in and bought all the banks in Colombia. He bought the entire banking industry. And then he settled the war between the two groups, the Medellin and the Cali. The Cali were in the jungle and Medellins were in the cities. They had a war and Bush ended it. I'm telling you, this is very weird and very dangerous right now, the next several months. That's why I believe Trump never goes out of Cheyenne Mountain. And let me repeat that. Trump never goes out of Cheyenne Mountain. And do the height comparisons and make your own conclusions for recent appearances.
I think that's going to be a great spot to leave it right there.
Leave it there because it's something that's very difficult to follow up.
It is. Well, I want to thank you for coming on this Sunday, January 5th of 2025. And if anybody wants to follow Jim Willie, be sure and sign up to his newsletter, golden-jackass.com. You can get on his newsletter, have consult calls. You can make a donation to help him out because he's been doing a lot of good work. And if you need help with gold or silver, you can get in touch with either one of us because we'd be glad to help you out with that. And other than that, I just want to thank you, Jim. It's always a pleasure to have you come on, and I enjoy our little conversations that we have before we even kick off the show.
Well, it's always fun, Scott, and stay frosty. I'm working on getting frosty, but I'm also working very hard on decompressing.
I am too.
I try to do a few hours of study and then do a decompression, take a nap, a siesta, power nap. I wake up and I'm strong. I'm working on something on private matter right now, and I'm trying to get rid of some personal investments. I got to say something. I've tried 9, 10, 11, 12 different things here, and every single one has been more than a 100% loss. Every single one. So this is not where you go to start a business or begin investments. There's a joke. How do you leave Costa Rica as a millionaire?
Never go.
You arrive with 3.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go.
And you leave with 1.
Yeah. Well,
all right. Thanks for having me on, Scott.
I appreciate you coming on, and everybody out there, stay frosty, and the year is just getting started. Thanks a lot, Jim.
This is like a new baseball game, and we won. We have a lead in the first inning. It's a new game. The election is the beginning. It's not the end.
That's it. All right.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks.